interactive link that we have for storm tracking. It looks like the western side of the track still holds near Destin, Florida, Fort Walton Beach area, and then it extends all the way over. We never want to pay attention directly down the center where this black line is of the track, because that may not be where the storm ends up going. It may go to the western side of this track, but that extends all the way over here to St. George Island, Florida. Now, like I said, the eastern side of the system out here in this area up into Appalachia Bay and Cedar Key, these areas are going to get this massive storm surge, and they're going to see it the most. So if we go back to the inundation, storm surge inundation maps, we can take a look and see what's going on. Looks like the surge over here towards Pensacola looks very minimal just from the initial push of water ahead of the system. But as we get those wraparound winds, if the storm does take an easterly track, the wraparound winds will actually prevent that surge from occurring and may blow it out. The closer you are to the center, you may get negative storm surge in those bays as it cuts through the coastal breaks and into the Gulf of Mexico. But you can see here some of these flood inundation maps. Let me draw this up so you can see the legend. And we're looking at greater than 9 feet. Some of these areas in Appalachia Bay, Cedar Key, we're looking at 10 to 12 foot above ground for some of these zones. This is a high resolution product, so you can kind of zoom into your area and see what's going on. But this is going to be a massive surge going on in this area right here. 10 to 12 feet above ground, I may add, is very significant for these folks. This is a very low-lying marshlands and estuaries, and this is going to get flooded out pretty bad. So basically, Panama City area greater than 3 feet, and then all the way over to the east down into portions close to Hermosa Springs, north of Tampa Bay, looking at greater than 3 feet. So storm surge inundation is going to vary depending on the track of the storm, but just mainly this area is going to get sacked pretty hard. And we saw what the Category 1 Hurricane Hermine in 2016 did. It just made hurricane status at the coastal landfall, and it did significant flooding for that area. I think it ended up being about 4 or 5 feet of surge. So looking at our Saffir-Simpson scale, we have Category 2 right now, which is 96 to 110, so we're looking at 6 to 8 feet. Category 3 is 111 mile per hour winds to 129 with a 9 to 12 foot surge. If this storm does rapidly intensify further this afternoon, it sort of has calmed down a little bit, but the eyewall replacement cycle may allow it to strengthen further, and we may get another surge in activity, another surge in its strengthening process, may put it up to a Category 4. It's an outside chance right now, but that would mean a stronger surge for these areas. So the NHC has not changed their advisory since the last one, and they're holding to their numbers for right now. So we put a lot of our trust in them. Here's wind speed probabilities for a lot of folks looking onwards and inland into Georgia. It looks like 100% probability up to just south of Atlanta, pushing into Georgia, and then we get high probabilities pushing all the way through the Carolinas, mainly the Midlands, and then all the way down to the coast. And as the storm moves off to the northeast, those chances come down in time. Let's take a look at key messages here. Life-threatening storm surge likely along portions of the coast of the Florida Panhandle, Big Bend, and Nature Coast. A storm surge warning is in effect of these areas. Water levels will rise in advance of the center of Michael, and residents within the storm surge warning area should finish preparations to protect life and property today. So if you haven't evacuated yet and you're thinking about it, or you're on the fine line of whether or not you want to, I would say if you're in this zone, I would get out. That's going to be significant flooding. So you can look at these key messages in the NHC. I don't want to go through and read everything text by text. So this is readily available at nhc.noaa.gov. You can come in and look at these key messages. But some of the visible maps here, we're looking at rainfall potentials, 6 to 10 inches. In some areas a little bit higher than that. The NHC advisories have some details on this as well. But you can see the swath of heavier rains moving right through the Carolinas. And again, the stress on the heavy rainfall amounts coupled with the flooding and the storm surge along the Florida coast, pushing even inland, is going to be probably some of the most deadly force of the hurricane outside of what the winds will do. And that's usually the most deadly part of a hurricane, is the flooding and deaths occurred by flooding. So we have to be very cautious. We want to urge people, if you're along the coastline there, to get out, because 10 to 12 feet means it's up to your roof in your homes on some of those low-lying homes. So that's a significant thing to consider here. We have flash flood potentials here in the moderate zone as the storm moves into the coastline. So flash flooding tends to die off as the storm heads to the northeast in time, especially since the forward speed will be picking up along that cold front that's sweeping in and pulling it out to sea. Look at the quick model runs. Let me refresh this and see if we can't get the 12 o'clock runs and let this load for just a second. And let me go back to initialization at GFS, and we're looking at this area of high pressure right here. just off the mid-Atlantic. This is one of the steering mechanisms for this storm. And then in time, we're going to have a cold front moving in with an upper low over the Great Lakes and a cold front, and this storm's going to be following it. So if we go to precip moisture, let's go to precip. We can see this low coming together out here. Looks like near Nebraska, and this will be lifting up towards the Great Lakes. But you can see the high pressure and clockwise motion pulling the storm up and along towards this cold front, and we see it lifting to the north. Here comes the cold front dropping down into Louisiana as we get into Wednesday night. And then the storm joins the tail end of this and moves up to the northeast pretty quickly. But we can see where it's landing. The GFS is putting it and then pulling it through the Carolinas, through the Midlands, and then up and through. So your Weather Service offices, each individual Weather Service office has products and information for tropical weather. The NHC only covers the coastline, so the tropical storm warnings, watches, hurricane watches, warnings, everything like that only pertains to the coastline. But the Weather Service offices individually from Columbia, GSP, Peachtree, Georgia, they all have this information on their site if you just go to their site and go to tropical. Here's an example of one, and I'll pick, let's see, let's try, well, no, not Tampa Bay. Let me go back to Columbia, for instance. Let me refresh the page to make sure we're getting the latest information here. Let that load for just a second. Here we go. So Columbia's page, for instance, if you're in the Midlands of South Carolina, there's a briefing right here on this page. If you go to the tropical, go to the home page first, which is right here, and you scroll down and look for tropical weather wherever you are, because they're going to have a briefing on this. And you click on that, and then next thing, you let it load, and right here is a PDF product, and there's some text down here that tells you what's going to happen. And then you have this product here. You also have threats and impacts that show the track and some of the wind impacts that is going to happen. So storm surge not being a threat for Columbia, but flooding, rain threat somewhat, and moderate, and then tornado threat as well, all the way down the coastline. So that's what from the Columbia office. And so these are examples of some products that are available at your local Weather Service office. We'll look at, these are PDFs, so make sure you can get PDF. Most smartphones can get it, and this gives you a breakdown. So National Weather Service, Charleston, Columbia, and most offices have this product available right here. So here's some of the effects that it's showing it's going to have over your areas. And if there are any specific questions about that, maybe I'll come back to the graph. But I definitely wanted to take a quick look at the overall picture and some of the composite radar, where we're showing some of those rains almost making it along the Florida coast here, along the Gulf Coast near Sarasota, Tampa Bay area. And then we're seeing some convergent moisture working its way up into the Carolinas or the Georgia coast and northern Florida coast here. Not associated with Michael, but it is associated with troughing down the coastline there with high pressure working it in. In time, these rains will increase over this area. We're going to see tropical storm force winds arriving this afternoon into this evening along the panhandle of Florida. We can already see the outskirts, some of the upper cirrus clouds moving into the coastline now. And in time, these rain bands are going to start working their way in as well. So conditions will continue to deteriorate this afternoon into tonight for the panhandle of Florida, where this storm is heading. And then as time goes on, conditions will worsen. And by tomorrow, I'd say landfall is going to be sometime tomorrow, early afternoon. It's hard to say exactly with the timing, but I think we're pinning it sometime late morning to mid-afternoonish, sometime there where it makes landfall. The NHC track jumps a little bit in time, but if we get, let me see here, pull the forecast cone up, and it looks like sometime between Wednesday morning and Wednesday evening, so we could easily say sometime in the late morning to mid-afternoon, like I said, somewhere in that time frame for a landfall for the system. So that's going to be significant for them. Let's go ahead and take a look at sea surface temperatures. Again, very warm where the storm is. We're looking at 28 to 29 and even upwards of 30 degrees Celsius for some areas. So that puts it right between 82 to 86-ish degrees Fahrenheit, which is very warm. It's plenty warm to sustain a hurricane or a tropical storm. Tropical cyclone heat potential here also very high, which adds to the overall surface fueling of the system from deep water, deep warm layering below the surface. So even though the storm's moving over the warm water, it's not going to cool. It's not going to cause any cool water upwelling ahead of it to sort of weaken it. It's actually going to be feeding off the warm waters all the way into the coastline, which is not a good scenario. So extratropical storm surge map here. We'll take a quick look at some of these areas, and this is just a GFS based product here, not exact, but it gives you an idea of what's going on. So here's Apalachicola, Florida. To give you an example of the surge that's going to occur, this black line represents the forecast above the normal tide values, which would be here in the blue. And we have a significant jump above high astronomical tide values, which is the hat value down here, all the way up towards 8 feet above mean low water level. So that is a pretty big number for that area. Even over here to Pensacola, we're looking at tides being higher than normal as well. You're looking at 3.5 feet, so you're about 1.5 feet over high astronomical tide value. Now if the wind does go offshore from the east and then to the northeast and north, this will go down. This number will go down a little bit further because we're looking at possible negative storm surge where the water blows out, and so that's what we could be expecting. Going back to the model, I want to take a quick look at the latest German icon model run, and this is from the 12 p.m. run today. This one shows a little bit more detail to it, and it takes the same track as GFS, maybe just a hair upstate, just a little bit more to the west, which would graze the mountain areas a little bit harder, and holds it as a tropical storm all the way through, mainly to the mid-Atlantic region. So this model is a little bit more aggressive than I think what the NHC is going for, but it could maintain some strength with a little bit of Atlantic moisture pumping into it. It's just going to continue to weaken as it's over land. Systems like this tend to not, unless there's a lot of rainfall already on the ground where we get what we call a brown ocean effect, it doesn't feed off of very much on the land, especially at the higher elevations in the Midlands, and that tends to tear it apart. You don't get a lot of that surface pull that it needs, that moist flow. So that's that. Here's the Euro. This one should have been loaded by now, so I'm going to go ahead and run this one. And this is a 850 millibar reading, so this is from the 12 o'clock p.m. today run. We run this one forward and basically brings it in land just a little bit to the west of where the GFS and Icon bring it, but it does bring it inland a little closer to the coast, so just east of the Midlands. So basically right down the middle of the track, the NHC track is pretty favored right now as far as where the storm is going to go once it makes landfall and heads inland into the northeast. So lots of folks are going to be faced with power outages, possible flooding all the way across the Carolinas, and even in portions of the mid-Atlantic states. You could be looking at some residual strong winds and tropical storm force gusting up that way. Let's take a look at the rainfall amounts, potential rainfall amounts for the next 3 days. This is days 1 through 3 through the Weather Prediction Center for quantitative precipitation forecast. And it looks like a pretty broad swath of rain moving right through the middle of the Carolinas, and this is putting it somewhere between anywhere from 3, I'd say, to 6 inches mostly. For the Charleston area along the coast, some of these coastal zones are looking at about 3 to 5 inches for the most part, especially a little further north towards the Grand Strand where the storm cuts in a little closer towards the ocean there. You may get a little bit more rain on that side. But I think NWS GSP is holding off on their flood products for now, from what I heard from Scotty Powell in Morganton. Maybe because there's maybe a little bit of dry air wrapping around on the western side of the system. Even with the cold front there, you get high pressure building out west, and you get a little bit of dry air pushing in behind that cold front, may get wrapped around the western side of the system, which means less rainfall. And with it being on the move, it may not be as much of a threat for extreme western North Carolina and the mountainous zones. But even 2 to 4 inches for what they may call for could be significant for some of those areas if it comes down all at one time in a very short amount of time. So see a few questions coming in. I thank every one of you for hopping on now. I see DJ Hustle, Stacy Apel, Stacy Steele, Greg Walters, Barry Wolf, lots of folks hopping on. And I'm going to get to some of your questions here in just a moment. I want to make sure that I've covered most of the bases that need to be covered for this. Once again, if you're just hopping on, Hurricane Michael, Category 2, strong Category 2, winds of 110 miles per hour. 1 more mile per hour in strengthening means it goes to Category 3. And Category 3 is 111 to 129. So that's what we're looking at right now. I think that's it for the main portion of the live feed for the hurricane impacts heading into land. Now the individual Weather Service offices will have more details about that, but let me go ahead and take a look at some of the questions here. We have Lana Von Kendall from Charleston. Hey, how are you? Crystal Kinney. Tracy Henry, Dana Roos Johnson. Hey, how are you? Jim Gabriel Kubu. Still need to get with you because we have something to talk about with Wind Sports from Wounded Warriors. We have Alan Hancock Holmes on, Amy Barrington, Ashley Field Dukes. Thank you all for coming on. Brandy Danielle from Navarre, Florida. And I did post this in the Concerned Citizens from Navarre, Florida group, so I appreciate you hopping on. You guys look like you're going to be a little bit to the western side of the track, which is good. If it stays down the middle or goes to the eastern side, then you're even better, in better shape, but still not something to take lightly whatsoever with the strong wraparound effects. We have Khaki Rivers. Hey, Khaki, Linda Hanf. We have Kevin Bird, Amy Nay. Lots of friendly faces here. A lot of folks from all around. I think someone said that they logged in from Italy earlier. We have John Thomas. He's trying to get in from Costa Rica earlier. He messaged me, and he's trying to fly into Atlanta. And I told him to get on that plane tomorrow if he can, because after that it's going to go downhill for Thursday. So as far as flights go, I can't tell you what flights are going to do. You have to call your individual airlines to find out more information about what they're going to do with their flights if you're flying into these zones that are ahead of this, like Columbia, Atlanta, these hubs for airports. Not sure if they would cancel flights or not, but they may do that Thursday for Columbia, since the storm's going to be moving right over that area. And that's not a definite, but you might want to check with your flight schedules if you're going to be in the air anytime soon. And there's Amanda, my wife Amanda. Hey Amanda, how are you? Thank you for watching. Appreciate it. It's always nice to have her watching and supporting. Let's see here. Holly Marie asks, do you think it's still going to make an eastward turn at some point? And the answer is no. I don't think it's going to make an eastward turn. I think it may possibly veer slightly east and maybe go just east of Panama City as it makes landfall in Florida. But it's a little too early to tell just yet if it's going to make an easterly swing. I just don't see it happening with that strong high pressure built into the Atlantic, keeping it blocked in along the Florida coast. It's going to take pretty much northerly track until it gets to land and joins with that cold front. So there's the timing thing, and then curves away. So no, I don't think it's going to make an easterly turn anytime soon, at least not until landfall. So sorry to bring bad news there. It looks like it's going to make a pretty straight beeline into the coast. Okay, let's see here. Joshua Pookie Coke, rain for us in Charleston around Thursday early a.m. Let's see if I can find NWS Charleston. That's Columbia. Here's Charleston right here. It looks like from what they have in their briefing from earlier, in fact I had it right here already, is basically this report came out 12:30 today. Some of the impacts for the Charleston area, there are a lot of Charleston folks on this live session right now. Wind hazard is going to be a moderate confidence, so it looks like winds are going to be inevitable at some point, and this is going to be basically starting tomorrow afternoon and going into most of the day on Thursday. Winds are going to be ramping up from the south to southeast and really pummeling the shoreline, so it's going to be adding to some water, some surge, and so they're calling for up to 2 feet above ground level surge just from this system alone, and that is also coupling with the perigean tide. And then we're also looking at additional saltwater flooding along the coast just because we already have higher than normal tides due to perigean fluxing plus whatever this brings with onshore flow. So that's not good for us. It won't be as bad as Irma that we had last year from 300 and something miles away, but this storm won't have enough time to really get more surge into the area. But so they are calling for about 2 feet. And so here are some of the main points: hazards, impacts. Greatest impacts will be wind, which is elevated. That means they're calling for tropical storm force winds. I did see that we could see winds of 59 to 73 miles per hour. That might be in gusts. I think the majority of our winds are going to be somewhere in the tropical storm force sustained winds along the coast, where we just have just over that value, and then their gusting is going to be pushing up into the 50s, 60s, and possibly into the low 70s. So that's sort of what the NWS thinking is right now. But storm surge is limited. Rainfall limited, tornadoes. Rainfall for Charleston is about 3 to 5 inches. Tornadoes limited, but possible. And anytime we have a tropical system wrapping bands into the coast, we get some upper shear, and we get a little bit of rotation. These little small mesocyclone activities and events that are very short-lived, so these tornado warnings may come out and be gone by the time you get them. So just be aware if you're in weak structures to be concerned about tornadic activity. And then elevated marine waters, so small craft advisories, gale advisories, gale warnings will be issued in time, I'm sure. But overall, Michael continues to strengthen, additional strengthening likely before landfall, and then they go on to say wind threats moderate for Charleston here. Tornado threats are moderate, even though there's some yellow here. They're still calling for moderate for the Charleston area. Flooding rain potential, we're looking at, actually now they changed to 2 to 4 inches, so a little bit less than 3 to 5 what they had earlier for the Charleston area. Locally higher amounts possible, though, so that means some places may see 6, depending on what the rainfall totals do over the broad area of the Charleston forecast zone. 2 to 3 inches, more likely inland over Georgia and the Sylvania Statesboro area. This is also part of the Charleston Weather Service forecast zone. And the threats for winds higher offshore, so the gales are going to be coming up off the coastline into the 40s and 50s for sustained winds with gusts up to 50 knots possible, and that's over the ocean. Storm surge inundation once again up to 2 feet above ground, and that's during the main high tides on Thursday. So whatever high tides you know of on Thursday, just be aware that there's going to probably be extensive saltwater flooding along with any heavy rains that occur and flash flooding. Those low-lying zones will be flooding out. So the event summaries here, it's all on the National Weather Service Charleston page if you want to take a look. That's a quick translation of everything that they have, but there is some text there that's worth reading, and I'll continue to post that in the Chucktown Wind Report here in Charleston and on my profile page for the locals here, because I'm here with you in Charleston as well. We'll go back to the NHC map. In fact, you know what? Let's go ahead and take a look at the latest COD GOES 16 imagery while I'm peeling through a few more questions here. We have James Hodges on. Hey, James, how are you doing? Let's see. Rain Thursday, I'm guessing. Melissa, yes. Rain all day Thursday. It's going to be messy. It's going to be windy and messy. Vicky Boggs Facho asked, what's Fort Walton area looking like? Got family staying 4 miles inland. I'm worried about them. Fort Walton, it looks like on the track here, Fort Walton is just on the western side here. This is Choctawhatchee Bay. Fort Walton's here, Fort Walton Beach. And so you're on the western side of the track now. Right now there's easterly winds, and that's going to continue. You may have some east-southeast mixing in as the storm lifts to the north. But in time, if we look at the forecast models, I think we're going to see a lot of these models start to agree with an offshore wind developing as we get into tomorrow. In fact, there it is right there. We have winds coming up from the NAM, the North American model, coming up over 60 miles an hour for sustained winds. And then we have a northerly flow. So that's good for the Fort Walton Beach area. It's not good because the winds are going to be high, but it's good because the surge won't be there. It'll actually be pushing water out of the bay through the coastal breaks. So these areas right here, along with the coastal breaks, are going to have a massive amount of water pulling through them. I don't suggest anyone swimming at the beaches along these areas as well, even if there's an offshore wind, because the currents are going to be bad as well. But the winds are going to be switching up to offshore values there, and then slowly ebbing as we get into Wednesday night into Thursday morning. Things are going to start to really ramp down a good bit. But the winds will stay to the north-northwest. In fact, there's a cold air mass coming in behind the cold front, so things are going to cool down for most everybody in the south and the southeast. Once all of this clears the entire southeast region, the silver lining is that we all get cooler temperatures, so much needed. We've been in the heat for so long. It's actually going to feel kind of nice, but you know, you folks down here, you're probably going to be dealing with some hurricane damage to deal with and clean up. So my thoughts go out to you, because I know that this isn't a favorable situation for your area, especially in October. So if you're in this zone, please evacuate. If you haven't already, you still have some time. Conditions are going to start to deteriorate later this afternoon to tonight, so there still is time to get away from the coastline, but some of these effects are going to be really pushing inland. So if you go anywhere, go to the northwest and get away from it. Get away from the cone. Never just go north inside of the cone, because the effects, you may have a tornado that rips your house apart if you go up in that area. There's any number of risks that you take by staying in the cone, no matter how far you go inland. So I always suggest go away from it. Eastern side of the storm is going to be the strongest. I wouldn't even stay on the eastern side. I would try to go to the west or the northwest and get away from the whole thing in general. That's just my opinion about it. As far as where to go, I would get to the western side of this whole thing and get away from where the curve is. So hopefully I answered your question. Greg Walters, surge forecast for Charleston. I know he's asking about Charleston here. Southeast region, we are lit up in red, which means there is a surge potential. And here's our graph. Starting tonight, we're going to have higher than normal tides. That's from perigean fluxing and the strong southeast, east-southeast winds we're having now. We started that yesterday, and these driving winds are just pushing more water into the coast. And this is not associated with Hurricane Michael yet. These winds are from high pressure in the Atlantic, increasing the gradient into trough, an area of troughing down near our area and all the way down to coastal Georgia. So we're seeing the onshore winds really pushing the water into the coast. So these HAT values, these high astronomical tide values, are not from Michael. But as we get into Thursday, this will be from Michael right here. So it doesn't look like an extreme amount, but it looks like maybe a foot to foot and a half. And this is guidance only from the GFS. This is apt to change depending on the track of the storm. If the track goes a little further east, we'll probably see these numbers come up. But the general idea is that we have higher than normal tides expected for the next several high tide occurrences, and we're going to be hitting 7 feet plus. So that's pretty significant for those of us in Charleston. We know what that means. We know that that's pretty you know, not good, but it's not terrible. It just means a lot of folks are going to be flooding out. Okay, let's see here. Drive from Charleston to Atlanta, Melissa, I'm not sure. You know, if you're going on Thursday, I wouldn't recommend it. It's going to be a pretty nasty drive all the way around. If you're going to do that, do today or tomorrow morning, and things are going to go south in Atlanta. Atlanta's actually not going to be as bad as it will be to the south near Statesboro and towards the coastline. So if that means anything to you, I think Atlanta will probably get some tropical storm force gusting winds, maybe a little bit of rain, but nothing significant unless any tornado outbreaks occur. Let's see here. Amanda Taylor's on. Jordy Johnson, do you think there will be any storm surge or flooding for Edisto? And again, just showing the Charleston ET surge, it looks like the Weather Service Charleston is calling for 2 feet on the surge, and that's being modest for them, or being actually very direct for them to say 2 feet. Go back and take a look at that product one more time. Make sure we're on track with it from the latest report. And yeah, inundation up to 2 feet above ground. So that goes for the entire coastal zone for the National Weather Service forecast zone for South Carolina down into Georgia. So that's what it's going to be for Edisto for your surge. And Hilton Head Island, Margo, that goes for you as well for the surge. Tropical storm force winds for sure. We'll all be feeling that up and down the coastline, some more than others. The ones further south will probably be feeling a little bit more than the ones further north as the storm weakens going inland. Okay, Carolina Weather Group. I guess that's James Brereton. He's saying Perry Clanton. He's emergency management guy from Columbia. I think he's a fireman. He asks, do you think we'll have a tornado watch for the upstate of South Carolina? And the answer is I'm not sure, because NWS Columbia has not basically shaded the area for tornadic activity as of yet. I think I have their product up. Let me see if I can pull theirs up and see if they have a tornado threat. That's Tallahassee. Here's Columbia right here. Briefing from Weather Service Columbia. Winds elevated for them. Tornado is actually elevated to the Eastern Midlands and CSRA. Let's take a look and see what they're saying for that. If we scroll down for tornado activity, that's a big deal up in the Midlands. Let me see if I can find it. Looks like they don't actually have that one. The wind threat is there for this particular product, but hang tight. I've got another way we can look at this. Tornado threat is just along the eastern side of Columbia here, where the tornado threat is. So Perry, if you're watching, definitely take a look at this map right here, and you can also click on NWSCAE for National Weather Service Columbia to find out what they updated on. This line was a little further south towards Orangeburg earlier, so this is creeping a little bit more and more towards the city of Columbia, which puts a majority of the eastern side of the city in Columbia already. Potential for a few tornadoes is there, so hopefully that answers your question. Let's see. Appreciate the question, by the way. Charlie Paul, Scott Woodson, thank you guys for coming on. Savannah, kids want to know if they have school. Joanna Boyd asked that, and I'm not sure what school systems are going to do when it comes to Thursday, because the uncertainty is still a little bit high on, if they're looking for sort of like high confidence forecasts for specific criteria to close schools. And so if there's an imminent threat that's going to put children's lives at risk, they will do that. I'm not sure if they're going to or not, but they may start making some announcements tonight or maybe even tomorrow. They may wait till tomorrow to do that before they just pull the gun or pull the trigger a little bit early. They probably, in my opinion, will wait till tomorrow to announce any kind of school closures for the following day. That way they don't interrupt school processes for tomorrow. So that's my input there. I'm not a county expert by any means, but I've seen most schools and county entities usually wait till the day before in a situation like this before they make that decision. James Hollingsworth, is Charleston going to close the coastal islands? I don't think they will. This isn't a hurricane. It's not going to have major impacts. Significant impacts, yes, but then again, it's up to the townships to make that decision if they're going to close those islands or not. So Union, that's my answer. And yeah, up in Union, y'all are going to be experiencing some gusty winds and some possible heavy rains up in that area. So make sure to tune in to National Weather Service GSP up in that area for the latest. Let's see, we got Itzpa, Rojas, Rao, Santa Rosa County inland, especially Navarre proper, and that is going to be on the western side, as I talked about earlier on the track, it'll be on the western side of the system. So I think that's good for the questions. I don't have much time left. I've got to get off the horn here, but I appreciate you all coming on, and I'll be back on again tonight, 9 o'clock with the Carolina Weather Group. We're going to have a panel of meteorologists to discuss the latest on Hurricane Michael, what we're thinking in the Midlands with Chris Jackson from South Carolina Weather. We have Scotty Powell of Morganton, North Carolina, James Brereton from Charlotte, North Carolina. We're all going to be discussing our forecast zones. I'm going to try to get Ed Petrowski from Myrtle Beach if he can. He's always a wild card in the situation, but I'd love to get him in the Grand Strand to come on as a special guest on our show tonight. And with that said, I'm going to go ahead and end it. If there are any other questions, just ask in the thread. I might be able to get to them. There's quite a few messages and emails piling up on me, but I'll try to get to them one by one. So just if you're on the Florida coast, be bracing for a major hurricane to hit. If you're along the immediate coast, I still encourage you and urge you to evacuate if you still have time. Don't chance it. If you have a doubt about it, I wouldn't ignore that. I would go ahead and evacuate it. You still have some time to do that. So either way, you all take care. I'll see you back on at 9 o'clock with the Carolina Weather Group tonight. Bring your questions, bring your friends, bring anybody that wants to know more about what Hurricane Michael is doing. We're going to have an expert panel discussing it on all angles. And until next time, everyone take care and thanks for watching.